Is Pope Leo XIV actually black? So hold on to your seats because the Vatican just dropped the bombshell of the century. We have a new pope, the first American pope in history, and the internet is absolutely losing it over one explosive question. I know what you're thinking. Wait, what? The pope? Black? But this isn't clickbait. This is a legitimately earth-shaking revelation that's rewriting church history in real time. Let me take you on this wild journey that's part detective story, part cultural awakening, and entirely unprecedented. Pope Leo XIV, formerly known as Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost from Chicago, has just been elected as the 267th Pope of the Catholic Church. As he stepped onto that iconic balcony at St. Peter's Basilica, greeting thousands with "Peace be with you all," most people were focused on him being the first U.S.-born pontiff. But beneath that headline, a fascinating story was unfolding. A new Orleans genealogist named Jari C. Honora decided to dig into the new pope's background, and what he found has the Catholic world shook. According to newly uncovered records, Pope Leo's maternal grandparents, Joseph Martinez and Louise Baquier, were actually listed as black or mulatto in early 20th century Louisiana documents. These weren't just any records. These were official. Census entries showing that the Pope's grandparents lived in New Orleans' historic 7th Ward, a predominantly black Catholic neighborhood known for its rich Afro-Caribbean, African, and French heritage. Pause. Let that sink in. The leader of 1.3 billion Catholics worldwide, the man who sits on the throne of St. Peter might have black ancestry. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The Pope's grandparents eventually moved to Chicago, where his mother, Mildred Martinez, was born. And while the family didn't explicitly identify as black in later years, both historical records and family photographs tell a more complex story about their heritage. But wait, I hear you saying, is this really such a big deal? Surely there have been other black popes in history. And you'd be right to ask, because contrary to what many people believe, Pope Leo XIV wouldn't actually be the first pope with African ancestry. Let's rewind the clock way back. In the early centuries of the church, at least 3 popes came from North Africa. Pope Victor I served from 189 to 199 AD. Born in North Africa, he was known for decreeing that Easter should always be celebrated on a Sunday, a tradition that continues to this day. Pope Miltiades, who led the church from 311 to 314 AD, helped end the brutal persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire. He was there when Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, changing the course of Western civilization forever. And Pope Gelasius III, who served from 492 to 496 AD, was another African-born leader who wrote extensively about the relationship between church and state. He essentially created the original stay-in-your-lane doctrine between religious and political power. So no, Pope Leo XIV wouldn't be the first pope with African roots. But there's something profoundly different about this moment. Those earlier popes lived in a time before our modern understanding of race and identity. Their African heritage wasn't politicized or scrutinized the way it is today. The difference is that today this revelation is happening in real time, in an era where representation matters more than ever. And that's what makes this so powerful. Imagine growing up Catholic, rarely seeing yourself reflected in the stained glass windows or the artistic depictions of biblical figures. Imagine attending Mass where nearly all the clergy look nothing like you, and then, suddenly, discovering that the new spiritual leader of the entire Catholic Church might share your heritage. For Black Catholics who have often felt invisible within their own faith tradition, this is more than just an interesting genealogical footnote. It's revolutionary, but let's talk about who Pope Leo XIV actually is beyond this revelation. Those who know him describe him as serious, focused, and dependable with a good sense of humor. Father Mark Francis, a friend who attended the same seminary as the new pope in the 1970s, says he's not a showboat kind of person. The pope's brother, John Prevost, believes Pope Leo will be a second Pope Francis, following in his predecessors' footsteps by working for the underprivileged and marginalized. He has a deep feeling for the disenfranchised, for the poor, for those who were not listened to, John said. Before becoming pope, Cardinal Prevost spent much of his career as a missionary in South America. His global perspective is so pronounced that those who know him caution Americans against seeing him as simply an American pope. He's not an American pope. explains Reverend John Lydon, who knew the new pontiff during their undergraduate days at Villanova University. He's a pope who happened to be born in the United States. This global mindset is reflected in Pope Leo's career path. He led the Augustinian religious order for more than a decade as its prior general. Later, Pope Francis appointed him to head the Dicastery for Bishops, the powerful Vatican office that assesses and recommends candidates for new bishop appointments around the world. So we're looking at a leader with extensive international experience, deep connections to Latin America, and a reputation for championing the marginalized. And now, possibly, a pope with Black ancestry. But there's another layer to this story that we need to address. When asked about the genealogical discovery, the Pope's brother noted that the family doesn't claim Black identity. This raises profound questions about the complexities of racial identity, especially in America, where the one-drop rule and other racial classification systems have a long and troubling history. Many Americans have mixed ancestry they may not be aware of or identify with. For some families, particularly those with roots in places like Louisiana with its complex colonial history, racial identity has been fluid and sometimes deliberately obscured across generations. So does it matter if Pope Leo XIV doesn't personally identify as Black, even if his ancestors might have? That's a complex question without easy answers. What we do know is that this revelation comes at a time when the Catholic Church, like many institutions, is grappling with questions of diversity, inclusion, and its historical relationship with communities of color. And let's be honest, the Catholic Church's history with race is complicated at best. While there have been powerful Black Catholic saints, leaders, and communities throughout history, the Church has also been complicit in colonization, slavery, and racial discrimination at various points in its history. So having a pope with possible Black ancestry leading a global church where people of color make up the majority of believers carries profound symbolic weight, regardless of how the pope himself identifies. Of course, Pope Leo XIV's potential legacy extends far beyond questions of his ancestry. As the first American pope and a close ally of Pope Francis, he's expected to continue his predecessor's reforms within the church, and his positions on key issues are already drawing attention. In 2023, when asked about expanding women's roles in the church, he acknowledged that women are taking on new leadership positions at the Vatican, but cautioned that clericalizing women wouldn't necessarily solve existing problems. Perhaps we need to look at a new understanding, or different understanding of both leadership, power, authority, and service, above all service in the church, from the different perspectives that can be brought to the life of the church by women and men. He said, these comments came during a historic meeting of Catholic bishops where Pope Francis had allowed women to participate and vote for the first time, showing that Pope Leo is likely to continue navigating between tradition and progress. Even former President Joe Biden, only the second Catholic president in U.S. history, weighed in on the significance of an American pope, saying he believes Pope Leo XIV will keep moving the church in the direction of being more ecumenical in reaching out. So here we stand at a fascinating crossroads in religious history. A Chicago-born pontiff with possible Black Creole ancestry now leads the world's largest Christian denomination. The symbolism is powerful, whether or not he personally embraces that aspect of his heritage. For Black Catholics, this moment offers a new kind of visibility and representation. For American Catholics, it's a historic first. And for the global church, it represents both continuity with Pope Francis's vision and the possibility of further evolution. The question of, is the Pope Black, may seem simple on the surface. But just like faith itself, the answer involves layers of complexity, history, and personal identity that resist easy categorization. What's undeniable is that Pope Leo XIV's election represents a new chapter in Catholic history, one that's being written in real time, challenging our assumptions about what a pope looks like and where he comes from. In a world increasingly divided along racial, political, and religious lines, perhaps there's something profoundly hopeful about a spiritual leader whose very identity transcends simple categories. A pope who, through his ancestry and experiences, embodies the complexities and contradictions of modern life while pointing toward the universal values that unite us. Whether you're Catholic or not, that's a story worth paying attention to. That's a moment worth witnessing, because sometimes history doesn't just happen in textbooks, it happens right before our eyes. And right now, we're watching it unfold. The question isn't just whether the Pope is black. The question is what it means for all of us that we're even asking. And the answer, that's still being written, one day at a time.